It's over 9,000!
Do it! Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday said tomorrow. So just do it! Make your dreams untrue!
This isn't even my final form.
Oh my goodness.
Or is it? So, hello and welcome to Screen Tones, where we talk anything and everything webcomics. Today, we're going to be talking about the fun topic of controlling your speed and level of detail to make comic pages at the speed you want to make them. I'm Verathane, my pronouns are she, they, and I make the webcomics Chiralt and Witchwood.
I am Rennie. I use she, they pronouns as well, and I make the webcomic Kate Blast.
And I'm Delphina. I use she, her pronouns, and I make the webcomic Sombulus.
So, I think we've all been in a place where you spend a lot of time on a specific panel and it looks amazing, but the level of energy that you've been putting into that panel isn't sustainable because it kind of tires you out. When you speed up your page creation process, it's a fine balance between controlling the level of detail in your art, using the resources that are available to you, and sometimes modifying the writing itself to make sure that things are moving at a pace that's enjoyable for yourself as well as for your readers. So today we're going to talk about how that is done. And my first question is, how long does it take you to make a comic page? And how much faster has your process gotten over time, Rennie?
So it's a bit wibbly wobbly on how long it takes for me. Usually I like to think of it in a range because it all depends on mood, how busy I am, day job, external factors. But usually it takes me about a week to get from start to finish on a page, but I'm also working on 2 pages at once. So I can usually get about 2 to 3 pages done every week. And that's really just to, maintain buffer and maintain update schedule and make up for those weeks where like it's, it might be a light week and I only get 1 page or no pages because mental health or things like that. So I would say it takes me about 2 or 3 days per page. That used to very much be much longer, back when I was still sort of honing my skills. And a lot of that comes from when you're a young artist, you get a lot of tension in your hand. There's a lot of nervousness and apprehension, and that translates in. So there's a lot of futzing and fiddling and trying to get it just right so it looks like it's in your mind. Now I am much more loose with it, putting much less pressure on the pen physically, um, which speed things up and helps my wrist not hurt so that I can work for longer times. But it's definitely, a case of, or as time has gone on, skill has improved, speed's improved, and I just don't want to put full power in every single panel. There's a couple panels I really want to save my energy for, but most panels it's like 70%, and I'm like, that's good enough. Let's go.
How about you, Delphi?
Yeah, I mean, I have similar experience because it's just, you do get better and faster and more confident as you go. So you're not figuring out the same things over and over again, like how to draw your main character's face after a couple years. Like, yeah, okay, I've drawn that face several times. So that part gets faster for sure. I think at the beginning, I was spending about 6 hours per page, I want to say, and I could do about 2 or 3 pages per week. But a lot of that pace was kind of determined by my initial enthusiasm about, like, with the writing and stuff was just, I didn't have quite so many plot complications yet to figure out. So the writing was a little easier, but the drawing was a little harder. And now I feel like it still takes me about 6 hours and I can do 2 pages a week. But now the time commitment has almost all shifted onto like the writing complexities of, okay, what am I trying to convey in this scene? Because the art part, the drawing part is just like kind of, okay, bam, 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 I already know how to do all of this. So I don't know that I save a lot of time like on the clock so much, but there are aspects of it that definitely got faster for me.
Yeah, I know that when I was working on Chiralt, I could whip out pages fairly quickly from the beginning, mostly because I was working fully in a sketchbook that I would carry around with me everywhere. So while I wasn't exactly tracking it, I could be drawing at like the back of a lecture room or whatever. And I had it down to a style that was pretty simple with a brush pen that would let me not spend too much time figuring out line weights. I could kind of do everything in one stroke and just commit to it right away. And honestly, I think using a big chunky pen was one of the biggest time saving factors in those early days. I would say that Chiralt pages on average took me about 2 hours a piece. But as I got towards the end of the story and I started putting in a lot more like detail into the art and spending a lot more time on the writing, like that time kind of slowly started creeping up on pages with a lot of detail. And now, when it comes to Witchwood, I think towards the end of Chiralt, I was probably doing like the pages were in the 3 to 4 hour range. And I'm pretty sure Witchwood pages are in a similar ballpark. It's even harder to track because I've switched my process so completely to like a very large batch system. So I'll sketch 15 to 20 pages over the course of a couple of weeks. And then I'll start like inking them and I'll ink for like a month and I'll just do nothing but inking. And then I'll start like the coloring stage. And in 3 months, I might have made like 50 pages or something like that. So I think it averages out to probably somewhere in the 3 to 4 hour range per page, but it's a little hard to tell. I still feel like my process has gotten more efficient though, because I've added full color, which Geralt never had. It was a complete black and white comic. So in the amount of time that I'm spending on my pages, I've become able to kind of add more apparent levels of polish. It never quite feels that way because I'm very like systematic about the way that I approach these things. Like I have always the same kind of layer structure that lets me apply things very quickly. Sometimes I feel like it's cheating, but I also don't think there's any such thing as cheating in art. So
I big agree there, and it's like I think it really helps to figure out what your approach is, because then when you get into doing the page, you're not thinking so much about, okay, how am I going to arrange these layers? What layer property is going to go on top of this? Is it going to be an overlay? Is it going to be this? You just know, okay, it's going to be this shade of purple, this specific shade, and it's going to be at 75% opacity, this thing, boom, done. And you have your system down pat, and you don't even have to think about it, and that helps so much in the speeding up.
Yeah, I think a lot of things work like that, honestly. Like when you're first starting out, you have to figure out everything from scratch, but things get easier. Things definitely build one on top of the other. And like, once you have like the routines down, then you kind of get more complex with it. I mean, I know it sounds very simplistic to say, but it's true that you do form templates. You don't have to figure out what size your page is going to be every single time. You can just use the same things over and over again. And I think that's a thing that I didn't really recognize when I was first starting out, because I felt like it was always going to take this long. So I just want to throw that out there. If you're starting out, if you're not really sure and you're like, oh my gosh, it just took me 10 hours to even design this character. I'm like, well, that's fine, but that's great because you have the character designed and it's going to be much faster now. So all is not lost, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny. Like one of the very first things I did when I started the webcomic was, before I even started drawing, I decided on a canvas size. And that way, when it came time to get doing pre-press and getting it ready for the website, every single time it was change the canvas size to 210 by 297. When I did that, it just sped up the pre-press process so much. And then years down the line, when I went to go and make a printed copy of book one, it was so much easier because like I had already done the thinking and the work, so it just took no time at all, and it just plop, bing, boom, done. So like that is like a big time saver, number one, when you're starting out. Before you've even started drawing the thing, pick a size, put it on a sticky note or in a Google Doc folder, and just stick with it. That'll save future you tons of time and headaches.
yeah,
I just have like a blank like canvas that I keep, and every time I just save a new copy of that when I want to make a new page, and it's right there. I don't have to think about the size anymore.
Yeah, I like saving collections of swatches for all the different like elements of a scene that I might use. Like I have for each of my characters, like hair, skin, like shirt, pants, shoes, and all that stuff. And sometimes I'll reuse them across characters. And then I also have swatches for like this is the color that I want to use for shading inside and shading outside and highlights inside, different foliage colors so that I know that I'm staying within kind of the palette range that I've decided for myself. And once I'm in the thick of a scene, I can always change my mind on something. Like, say I finish the page according to my system, and I'm like, "Oh, the shading, like on like the shading color, I feel like I want to tweak it. I want to push it a little, increase the saturation." And that's a call that I can make after I've seen how it looks with my system already applied, and it'll be much faster to edit that after the fact rather than agonizing over what decisions I'm going to make before I even get started. That's kind of how I think about my page system now, which kind of leads me to the next question, which is where do you find the balance between making high quality art that is satisfying to you and just getting the page done?
This is a saying that is as dead as the horse is gonna get, but done is better than perfect. Is quintessential webcomic advice because you can get into drawing the most detailed city imaginable on this panel, and it's wonderful. There's so many people in it, and then you zoom out, and it's panel 1 of 9. Like you spent 8 hours on that panel so that it would look really cool, but for a panel that people are probably readers are only going to spend 2 to 5 seconds reading, which is kind of sad when you think about it, but it's true. I see like full finished illustration, print quality stuff, and comic panels as two separate things. Like it's really good to have that full power, you know what you can do when pushed to your limits for illustrations. But then you need to really ratchet that back in order to have pages that you can finish in a reasonable amount of time. There was a YouTube video I saw years ago that really informed my thinking on this, where it was this guy, and I drawing a total blank on what his name was and what his comic was. We'll have to link it on the Twitter after the episode goes up. But it took him, I think, 10 years to draw 100 pages or something, and every single panel was like the most detailed thing that you could imagine. Like it was just so detail packed, but at what cost? Where it took so long,
10 years.
yeah, 10 years to to get that out and rework it. And it's with webcomic time being how long it is, you need to think, okay, I want this to be done while I'm still alive. How do I get that happen? Like I jokingly say all the time that I want to finish my Cape Blast before I turn 40. Am I on track for it? We'll see. But in order for me to do that, I need to have a certain production. And in order to have that, some corners are going to have to be cut. And that's not necessarily bad.
Yeah, I feel kind of called out because I'm already 40, but anyway, it's just like
No offense.
it's fine. It's fine. We're 12 years into Somnambulist at this point, probably 13 by the time this episode goes up, but it's fine. So yeah, I think it's good to have a goal. I think it's really important to look at a longer term thing because it is a longer journey that we're doing, and if you're not careful it can get so much longer than you think it's going to be. I am somewhat of the opinion that it's good to do what sparks joy for you because that's what's going to give you energy. Like comics are, let's beat another dead horse here, comics are a marathon, not a race. So it's going to go on for a while and you need to have something to be excited about to come back to there. And some people are very excited about making very high quality illustrations that just knock people's socks off and go, wow, that is show-stoppingly good. And I absolutely love what this person is doing. The art is amazing without me even knowing the story. And like some people like really thrive on that energy. And if it means taking time to do a little more rendering or shiny effects on some panels, that's fine. But I think what we're talking about here is there's a point where it becomes counterproductive. There's a point where, especially for me, I need to move forward. I need to have that feeling of moving forward at a reasonable pace, or my readers are going to be bored. I'm going to be bored. And I might spend so long on a certain part of the story that, like, I won't even like the writing by the time I'm done rendering it. So, uh, that's another thing that I don't think people consider a lot either, is that, like, if you keep moving forward with your story, you're going to become a better writer. And even if you have the most gorgeous art at the beginning, if the writing was not to your satisfaction, it doesn't really even matter. So the smarter thing to do, in my personal opinion, is to keep moving forward, keep getting your things out, and eventually get to the point where you can start other projects if that's what you want to do. And then you'll have all of the tools and lessons that you've learned from writing, so that you can combine that with the practice that you've gotten from art. It just really just watch out for parts that are eating your time, that you're indulging a little too much with, and keep those moments as special treats rather than letting them overtake your process.
It's funny, the point about writing, because I was figuring that in this section we'd mostly be talking about like the actual just art itself, but it is true that you do move forward faster with storytelling the more you do of it in a certain span of time. And I always find that I have maybe like a 2 or 3 month window after I've written something in my script, where if I draw it out within that window and move on, I'll still be happy with it as I'm working on the pages. But if I get outside of that, I'm going to start like picking apart my script and seeing problems and being like, oh, I want to change this. And at a certain point, like it can go from necessary editing that genuinely helps the story to just like my tastes have changed and I'm just getting unsatisfied, and it didn't necessarily need to happen. So I do like being able to get through the story at a reasonable clip, just also because I don't necessarily want to outgrow my own writing before before I have a chance to like start seeing some of the plot lines that I've set up start to get paid off. For me, I cut every corner that I can in my art, and I am not ashamed to admit it. I will draw things like simply. I try not to use the undo tool like as much as possible. I'll just commit to kind of the first or second line that I draw on a given thing. I'll omit details. Nobody has buttons on their clothes anymore. It's terrible.
They stay together with
The,
magic.
the bugs all ate them.
Yes, there's
Oh,
bugs ate them. It's fine. Button free, pocket free. They're living a blissful existence with no fiddly bits on their clothing. It's great. But like I get the pages to a point where I'm happy looking at them. There is stuff if I was willing to spend like 3 or 4 more hours like laboring over them and giving them like a painterly style. I've tried doing that in the past for comic pages, and I've never managed to make more than like 10 or so in a given story before I kind of burn out on it. And I'm like, I'm gonna set this aside and just not think about it for now. I figured out what makes me happy. Ultimately, the balance is going to be down to the individual creator, because if I was feeling dissatisfied with my art, I would want to change things. And everyone's going to have a different kind of setting on their barometer for that kind of thing. So, with that in mind, what is your advice to people who finish one page and find that it just completely exhausts them? What elements should people look at adjusting in their art?
Definitely take a step back and figure out, okay, what about this is exhausting me? Maybe line art isn't your friend, or there's something about the colors that you chose that just isn't driving for you. So really, like, if that's bugging you, take a week and like sit back and stop and go, okay, what about my process here is driving me nuts or taking up a lot of my time? And then you dive back into that and figure out, okay, so maybe what would help speed things up is doing some extra studies on posing, or on just line work and just being more confident with your lines. Or some of it maybe you find that like you're caught drawing every single book in a bookstore, and you're like, you really want this bookstore to look good, but damn if it's annoying to have to draw like 8,000 books for 30 panels. Maybe like if it's something like that, check and see maybe there's an asset for it, or maybe you can make your own brush if that's something that you like to do. You can clip and Photoshop having the ability to make your own brushes is so clutch for speeding up this specific part of the process.
And also, sometimes someone else has made a brush for the thing that you want.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. So definitely ask and like just be like, post in like a forum or a Discord or whatever and just be like, hey, does anyone have a brush for X? And the answer is probably. I know in my comic, one of the main settings is in a comic book shop, and I had to draw the inside of that 7 jillion times. And I was like, and that actually drove me nuts. So I was like, okay, how do I simplify this? And one of the tips that I was given for looking at that was look at the backgrounds in like shows and cartoons like Ed and Eddie or things like that. Like the backgrounds are plain, they're squares, they maybe have a gradient. Or even if you look at like classic manga or even modern manga, like look at the corners that they cut. Like half the panels don't have backgrounds at all. And they're just like screen tones or a light cushion where it's something that you don't have to put too much in. And then there's a couple panels that because you've saved that time and energy prior, you can get to a panel of, okay, this is an impact panel. Now I go all out. And like just having those little things that can make backgrounds or make whatever's bugging you easier, just fully do it and just play around.
Yeah, it drives me crazy when I see people going like way overboard with backgrounds that seriously do not matter. Like I know some people really enjoy that and like rendering them out, but it's just a lot of times something that the reader won't even look at very much. Sometimes it's actually like too distracting from the foreground action if you want your characters to be doing something, and like you just can't tell what's going on because everything is at the same level of detail. So scaling the backgrounds back is a good idea for multiple reasons.
And also, like, there is such a thing as over rendering, especially when you have like the page sizes where it's like, yeah, like you look at each panel is only like a couple inches in either direction. So like if you over render something, all the features become blurred or hard to tell what's what. So that's why you see so much like cell shading and things like that in comics, where you can really just be like, okay, this is a simple shading, you get the picture, deal with it, go.
Yeah, I think clarity and like ease of communication is always going to be the number one priority, and you can get away with an awful lot of slack in the rest of the page so long as the things that are important for the reader to understand what's happening and to emotionally connect with the characters and with the plot, and to be able to emotionally connect with the characters. So the things that I prioritize in my art, other than kind of the flow of the lettering so that they know what order to read the bubbles in, is like the expressions on the characters' faces. I will spend time making sure that those have the right like nuance that I'm aiming for. Like if the expression doesn't look quite right, that is the one thing that I will keep picking over until I'm satisfied with it. Um, but things like body language too, like if they're walking fast or kicking or turning around or something, you should be able to tell that that's what they're doing, even if it doesn't look perfect. And things within the scenery, like if they're holding something and it's important that the reader knows what it is, like if it's a cup, that sort of thing. And other than that, if things get shaky, if things in the background reverts to gradients after a little while, like I've been trying not to do that because I'm trying to add more environmental storytelling in Witchwood. I'm trying to like push myself a little with what I'm putting into my comic pages. But like honestly, if it's a page that doesn't call for an elaborate establishing shot, you've already kind of set the scene and you're just focusing in on the characters, it's okay to like not have backgrounds at all for a little while.
One of my favorite tricks is put the fight in a warehouse. Then you can make every background gray.
Now you got to put in boxes and pipes and
Boxes
like
and pipes are easy though.
they
Those are
can be
great.
gestural, just some lines.
Yeah. One thing I do want to add too is look at your writing and look at how you're approaching like your writing, because I think a lot of people put a lot of panels per page, and sometimes that is what takes up like all your time because you're trying to draw 9 or 10 panels per page. I usually go for like 5 or 6 on your average page. I think that's probably a good format if you're doing the page format. It's just granular actions, like you're looking at we're talking about the cup. Like, is the cup really important? Is it really really important that they're picking up this cup? Is this Chekhov's cup? Like, are you
Chekhov's
really
cup.
yeah, just like I don't need that to be like the special thing. And like, you don't need to show every action. There's a lot of things where like if someone's getting ready for work, like maybe you just show them walking in the door at work. You don't need to show every single moment leading up to like them getting dressed and buttoning their shirt and going to get the toast and like that. If that's important, show it. If but like maybe it's not, and cutting that out will make your story progress faster. I know a lot of emphasis is like, well, maybe don't draw things as pretty, or maybe simplify your line work or simplify your shading style and stuff like that. And all that is important too. But like, I think what it comes down to for me is like, even further back than that, should you be drawing this thing at all? Or can you get away with not drawing it and moving on? And that'll help you progress faster.
Yeah, something I'm always looking for with my process right now is that as I go through, I'll start with the script and then I'll do thumbnails based on the script. And while I'm thumbnailing, I'll be kind of going off of a very default like approach to whatever is happening. Like I'll lay out my thumbnails usually with kind of a 6-panel grid, and I'll just kind of plug in each panel as I'm reading the script, as the image pops into my head. Like, this is character A with a line, and then character B with a line. And I'll try to, like, two characters are interacting, I'll include that in the panel. And if there's like a background mention, I'll include that in the panel. But then when I hit the stage with the sketching, where I'm starting to take those thumbnails and expand them into the full-sized pages and add a little more detail so that I know what's happening, and I put in the lettering, I start to kind of reassess what's going on in my thumbnails and try to identify panels that can be combined with one another, or that can be cut, or that can be like blended in with the next page, as much as possible. And usually out of every 8 pages, I can kind of trim down 1 or 2, just because my default approach to like, oh, my script says that so and so like walks to the other side of the room and then like touches something and then turns around. I was like, maybe they don't need to like touch the thing if it's not important, or they don't need to turn around, or they don't need to walk across the room. Like all these little beats that I threw it into the script and then I added it in my thumbnails, but like it wasn't crucial to the scene. And if I omit it, I'm just saving myself time. So why not?
Yeah, I think it's good too to do really rough thumbnails, like you're saying, just have those out, because there's stuff that you won't catch if it's just a script written out in a Word document. When you start to draw it and you start to like envision, okay, how many actual pages is this taking to do this? Then you learn so much more about the story you're telling, and you're kind of almost like telling the story again to yourself, and kind of seeing it through new eyes. So the thumbnail process can be really really valuable as a very quick way to get that script out and see what needs to be cut.
And also, like, just to elaborate on that too, one of the things I like to do is I'll do that during the thumbnails. Is like, okay, how do I tighten this up? How do I show this in a simpler way? Or like, if I'm doing a crowd scene, like I'm like, okay, does this have to be a crowd scene? Like, one of the scenes that's currently going on at the time of recording, is outside of a baseball stadium, and I was thinking, okay, does it impact the story in the way that I've written it to have it be a game day or not? No, then I'm not going to draw 20,000 people. So like think of ways that you can show things without like necessarily having to draw 8 jillion things. Like I know a lot of people for crowd scenes do the blob method, and that's able to sort of cut down on things, but it's very easy to sort of identify in the thumbnail stage of, okay, this is going to be a problem page, I'm going to need to think about this, or this is going to be a problem scene, how do I get around this, and start preparing early if it's something that you absolutely need to do. Like our friend Claire does so much crowd scenes, and I'm just like, how do you do this? How? But yeah.
Can always look into getting a crowd brush of little people that you just scatter
I've
around.
seen people make those. They're great.
Yeah, they're out there.
Yeah.
They don't fit with every style, but they can work.
Yeah. And the other thing is too that like you can do with like cutting down time and things like that, just from a writing perspective, is as you're going, like you might be able to see, oh, in 2 pages, this scene's supposed to go this way, but why are they doing that? No, let's just do it this way, and you can quickly adjust on the fly. So, like, I always like to say, keep things like written in pencil rather than in permanent marker, but that'll just help you speed things up and keep the process fun. Because if there's nothing more slow when you're drawing a scene that's not fun for you.
There is something that the topic of thumbnails reminded me. I've spoken to artists who don't thumbnail their pages because they feel that it slows things down, like it adds to the process. And I feel like I can go. I feel differently about that subject depending on the day. I feel like a lot of the time, though, the time that it saves me in planning out my sketches is like it makes up for the time that I spend actually sitting down and doing the thumbnails. Although it's hard to deny that it does take me a while to sit down and actually churn them out, just because I have to think so hard about what I'm doing during that part of the process. It's like such a foundational part of building the scene that it takes a lot of mental energy relative to the rest of it. But then that's mental energy that I'm spending in advance so that all the successive steps are a little easier.
And it's funny you say that too, because like I find that like for me, I really need to thumb out quiet scenes or scenes where it's dialogue or like more like dramatic moments. But when it comes to action, I can't thumbnail that in a way that like sort of captures it right, and that always bogs me down. So those are the pages that I tend to just go with the idea, and then I change it on the fly. But that's because I've done enough work beforehand, understanding the scene, envisioning it, and planning it out a little bit more like sort of a daydream kind of scenario, that I'm able to skip that step. So if you know you're confident in certain things, absolutely skip steps where you need to. But like just because thumbnails don't work for me for a specific thing doesn't mean I'm going to cut thumbnails out entirely, because they're very helpful for other scenes. So everything's customizable.
I'm also going to throw a little art tip out here. You can trace your own art, you can trace your own photos. I've definitely done pages where like I've already drawn this thing. I don't need to figure it out again. And I can just grab it and I could throw it into the new panel, and I could just either use it wholesale again or retrace it, and it'll save me a little time. I also know some people who just like make a whole bunch of like facial expressions for their characters and just throw them all in a document, and then when they're thumbnailing or sketching, they'll just drag them in and like draw the body or posture around that. I feel like it would limit you a little bit, but I do know a lot of people who swear by that and like just use that as part of their regular process to speed things up so they don't.
Genius.
Yeah, I mean, why not, man? I mean, and it's exactly like you were saying, Rennie, just finding the things that are not fun for you, that are going to slow you down from like a psychological perspective, because oh, I have to draw the books, I have to draw all the things. Like if you are dreading that page, there's a way to make that quicker and easier if you use models or your photos or anything, and just kind of like just trace it. It's fine.
I architecture confuses me. So I'm very thankful that my comic is set in the city in which I live. So every now and then I will go out on like an hour or two like excursion to be like, okay, I know this scene that's coming up is going to be roughly around here. Let's take the camera and just go, brrr, just take like 200 photos. And now when I'm actually drawing those scenes, I can just be like, huh, is it this angle? Okay, let's pull up a photo. Okay, that's close enough. For transform, tilt, tilt, tilt. Okay, there we go. Trace, done. Like now, I don't have to think about how to design Fenway Park. I can just trace it. It's great.
Yep. Mid comic, I'll just like be. I need a hand holding a cup. Well, there's a cup over here, so I'm going to take out my cell phone. I'm going to take a picture of me holding this cup. I'm just going to throw it at myself in Discord and like just copy and paste that into my page, and then I'll trace over that. And sometimes that's so much easier than like, where does the thumb go? Where is the handle? Like, yeah, it's done.
I have so many props just for that. Like I've got a prop sword. I've got a prop gun, and it's great.
I have to thank myself from like 4 years ago because there's a car in my comic right now that I have to draw a lot of. And 4 years ago, I was walking along the street and I saw a really cool car, and I was like, man, that's a cool car. I want to put that car in my comic. And I took a bunch of photos of it from like all the different angles that I could get at, like from the street, like just walking around it in a circle. Now I'm using those photos as my references for this car. I have been told that apparently for car models in specific, another trick that you can do is to get a Hot Wheels model of that car. Like, because those toys, like, you can even open little doors, you can pick them up and look at them from the top and from the bottom, and like they're very, very close replicas of like the actual make of car. And I love the idea. The problem is it's really hard to get a hold of one of these for the specific model
That's
that
so unfortunate.
I'm looking really hard because I would love to just have it,
All points bulletin.
just to
Yeah.
have it. Um, but yeah, I thought it was a genius idea, and I'm still thinking about it.
I remember you mentioned that a while ago when we were chatting about it, and I went after that talk. I went and got. I have a 1/8 model of Kate's motorcycle.
Oh,
It's like I gave her a Harley, so it's very easy to find Harley toys. So I just went, got it, and now it's like, bam! I have her motorcycle in my hands. It's awesome.
well, if anybody,
I hate you both because I have a completely fictional setting and there are no real cars or
You can't go to your
motorcycles.
kitchen and take a picture of a toaster.
I can't. Well, there is a toaster, but it won't be a flying toaster, so I can't do that. Like, it's just, I'm so jealous. I'm just about ready to like sculpt it out of clay or make a Lego
No,
model
but like
or
you,
something.
there's a bunch of people online who like take like household objects and they're like, okay, there's this cup, a can opener, and a hairbrush, and they arrange it and then they trace it and turn it into a spaceship,
That's
and
true.
it's genius.
I do not have the practice with that. I look at that. I'm like, no, it still looks like a blender and a hairbrush, but okay. But no,
oh, I do know some people who've used clay to sculpt things like their characters and stuff like that. Like especially if they have complex designs with horns and things like that, it can be pretty handy to have something you can pick up and turn around.
yeah, even rough stuff. I think it would kind of help, even if like it's not super detailed. And I know for me, for like crowd scenes or specifically like people indoors, and I need to know like, okay, I need to draw a person and I need to draw them like in relation to this doorway, like what an actual person would look like. So I can't like draw the person too big so they would never fit through that doorway. I can't draw them too small so they're hitting their head on the like doorknob. So that kind of thing always, I really get a lot out of references instead of having to like sit there spinning my wheels trying to figure out like, okay, where are you? Is this too big? Is this too small? And yeah, so there's all kinds of references and stuff out there, and it does feel like cheating a little bit sometimes because you're not 100% figuring everything out from scratch. But the point of your comic is to tell a story. It's not necessarily to come up with a perfect illustration out of your head of this, amazing coffee cup. So why not use those? Use the tools that are available to you to go ahead and do that.
Cheating is okay unless it's plagiarism.
Yeah, don't plagiarize. Don't steal other people's stuff without their permission. But yeah, it's a really good idea to just take a hard look at everything. Take a moment and see, what are you spending your time on? What are you trying to put a little more effort into that you maybe don't need to, that the audience won't even notice is gone, but still respects the clarity and emotional impact of your story? Because I think once you find that sweet spot, and it does kind of take a while to find that sweet spot, you can be very powerful and get through a lot of story very fast, I think.
And that's where I think it's like really helpful to like be loose with your own expectations too. As you're adjusting and learning your workflow, like there'll be some weeks where you're like, yeah, I can do 3 pages a week. That's awesome. And then you'll learn something and go, oh, I need to adjust this, but now I can only go 1 page at a time while I'm making this adjustment. And that's the beauty of webcomics. You're your own boss, unless you have a contract, then you're still your own boss technically. But just let the workflow dictate how you do things.
I want to mention the reference in the title of this episode, because I just realized that we haven't actually said it out loud in this one, but there's a common rule of thumb, which is that you should never use more than like 70% of your total power level on a given comic page. And honestly, I consider that words to live by.
Yeah, agree.
So, with that said, I'm going to call this a roasted red pepper and goat cheese wrap.
Yum, 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 yum.
And yeah, I've been your host, Farah Thane. And you can find my webcomics at chiralt.sevensmith.net or at witchwoodcomic.com.
And you can find my work at kateblast.com.
And I've been Delphina, and you can find my comic Zombulus at zombulus.com.
Or is it your full power? It's hard to tell.
It's not my full power. I have more power somewhere. I just don't know where it went. I
left mine plugged in.
Thank you for listening to Screen Tones, a webcomic podcast. Want to know some other ways to support us? Check out our Ko-fi at ko-fi.com/ScreenTonesCast, where your support will help us create more episodes, reach cool extra bonus goals, and keep us talking about anything and everything webcomics. You can also find us on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and our Discord server. Thank you so much for listening, sharing, rating, and supporting, and we'll see you next time.